All righty, guys. Welcome to another edition of the Ben and Ryan Show. We are recording, so behind the scenes, you can see Ben saying Happy Friday. So behind the scenes, we are recording on a Friday morning. So much for Ben's pleasure, we've moved from an 8 o'clock recording time to something where he's not ready to go to
an 8 p.m. from an 8 p.m. recording time, to be
clear.
Yeah,
it's 8 p.m. So we were late night, and that was approaching Ben's bedtime. So but anyway, we're now back. We're all energized, and this week we have Steve Leve with us. So Steve, welcome. He is Steve. Why don't I pass it to you? Why don't you give us a little history of who you are and kind of where you came from?
Well, I came from Coal City, Illinois, a small farming town outside of Chicago, about 80 miles. And I've kind of always had taught myself BASIC, had the books, all that stuff. Started working professionally as a software engineer, probably in the late 90s, publishing CD-ROM cubes of shareware. Nice. And, worked for a lot of small companies, kind of, advertising technology, marketing technology, that kind of stuff, e-commerce, that whole thing through the early 2000s. Started with ShareASale in 2008, been there for a long time, really kind of helped, I was employee number 8 there. My ID, I'm Steve at ShareASale.com before the last name started in. And there, with a small team, we built the business up, over through 2017, kind of a bit of a feature factory. We built a lot of features, grew the business 30% year-on-year growth through like a successful exit in 2017 when we were acquired. Kind of went from there, from software engineering, product engineering, feature design, more into infrastructure, architecture. We kind of inherited a bunch of migration projects and then kind of had to become, a back-end guy pretty fast. So then that kind of transitioned me to where I'm at now, which is a principal architect for ShareASale.com. And I'll pause there.
Nice. So today we're going to kind of dive into some of that history. And Steve brought up a couple of great points there about he's gone through an acquisition. For our audience here, there are ColdFusion people. It was ColdFusion, so there was technical debt there, like many of our brothers and sisters in ColdFusion. They stay on an old version, and there's some technical debt there. So we're gonna kind of dive. Whereas the kids say double click, they don't. It's like the 30-year-olds say double click. The kids make fun of the 30-year-olds saying double click. Everyone makes fun of 30-year-olds. It's like the 40-year-olds, 20-year-olds. We're all making fun of the 30-year-olds. But yeah, so we're going to kind of dive into those areas. And I know Ben's been through an acquisition, and I've been through one, and the Expert Cloud team's been through one. So we'll have some good banter on that.
Yeah. Also done other updating of very old systems too, which is always fun discoveries.
Yeah, so we'll have some good discussions between all of us on these topics. So, Steve, why don't we start with we'll start with the acquisition and kind of what are some of the lessons learned from that, or kind of what went well, what went wrong, lessons learned.
Say that coming into it, I was kind of feeling like, some growth pangs, was kind of feeling like I was getting into this cycle and was kind of maxed out where I was. So I kind of was glad to hear it a little bit. I wasn't sure what my next move was going to be. Kind of felt like I might need to, find my next challenge, right? And well, here it showed up. So we had this acquisition. I was, contemplating leaving at the time, but then, okay, we're getting bought by a bigger company. There's a lot of opportunity here. Like, maybe, you assume they're probably going to merge platforms, this, that, and the other. Not sure exactly what's going to happen, but it's a new experience. It's a bigger team. Didn't know much about, the across the pond. I mean, this is a, European company, we're acquired by, AWIN. So yeah, I was kind of looking forward to, what the future might bring, with that. And of course, reality sets in, and of course, things are always more difficult than you might, anticipate at first. A lot of the challenges, that came in at the time, we had been building and building and building and building and acquiring, technical debt was getting, to that level where it was really impeding progress. Like we needed to do something, we needed to have done something. But then we kind of got this double whammy with our hosting company was also going through a reorganization at the time. And so they were shifting data centers around. And so going into the acquisition, we had this notification from NTT, our hosting provider, that they were going to sunset the data center we're in. We have a physical infrastructure at the time, and we spend the next year not talking about it. Nobody mentions the data center migration. I mean, we spent a lot of time, training, on systems like, ShareASale. We got a lot done, but we were also pretty siloed. Our CTO, one of our, founders and CTO, Mike, he did a lot of things, himself, most of the infrastructure, a lot of the, kind of core business systems. If it dealt with a credit card, he would rather make the mistake himself, appreciate that. But at the same time, it doesn't spread knowledge amongst the team. So now when we get to these critical handoffs, it's harder. So, the cost of that debt really manifests when you need to move fast. Right. That's when technical debt bites you and you find out you wish you had done something different sooner. And it kind of also, it's an opportunity. Crisis is an opportunity, right? So you have a chance here also. If you have debt that you can walk away from and never, that's great. That's the best kind of technical debt. If you have like a technical debt ridden system that has been providing, value for years and you don't really have to ever fix it before it sunsets, you win, right?
Right.
So those are some of the challenges we were coming in with, but also our parent
organization. I got a question on that because I think with acquisitions, a lot of times there's this discussion. Mm-hmm. Okay, do you merge with the parent company's systems? Is the acquired company systems better? So then do you move everything to that system? How were those discussions internally with ShareASale? I think especially around the technical debt, like.
We had very different operating models, I would say, like just a way that we were very heavy into like this SME market, small, medium enterprise, small businesses, mom and pop shops, bloggers, very wide customer base of not extremely big companies. We had, some household names that you'd recognize as well, some national corporations, but a lot of them were smaller. Within the affiliate marketing space, you're all kind of fighting for a small slice of the pie that Google and Amazon already own, right? The big dogs have got over 90% of it, and the rest of us are fighting for the rest of that market. So coming into the acquisition, one of the big things was just business models. We were DIY, self-service, pre-funded. They're very much more a managed service, white glove, larger clients. Bigger, higher capacity with fewer accounts, right? Bigger accounts, but not quite as many. Whereas we're much more a self-service enterprise where people can go through wizards and onboard and sign up. They don't ever have to talk to a person to get operating on our platform. You can get up and running in one day. If you've got everything you need to go. Those are some of the things that made it difficult besides technology, right? So it's like, how do you merge these models? And that took quite a bit of time. Like I said, there was a lot of acquisitions going on, a lot of shuffling, deciding how these, it's not just technology. You have to merge support systems and IT and all the other things too. So of course those all kind of provide additional complications. The decision was obviously eventually we're going to merge down to there's going to be a single platform, and it's probably not going to be ours, right? They're ultimately you're going to want to operate one platform. It's just a matter of how do you get it into that shape. We need to take care of those existential threats, like the migration, the data center migration, right? We need to have somewhere to operate. And there's just always another thing, right? There's just always some other thing where you're gonna want servers,
Yeah.
So then the pandemic, right? We all went home, and a lot of us stayed home. It's been they went to a hybrid. To their credit, it really went very smoothly. Everybody was already working off of laptops. We already had VPNs. We already had the capability of working from anywhere, anytime. So really, shuttering the offices wasn't too bad for most of the business. We were able to keep operating pretty smoothly. Another thing with that was because of the type of business model ShareASale was in, we're huge on a lot of DIYers and crafters, and when the pandemic hit, that was our time to shine. We had 2-3 years of growth smashed into 1 year. I mean, servers were on fire and it was exciting, but that also kind of pushes the needle back a little bit on the shutdown. It's like, oh my Lord, they just they just made 3 years worth of money. But eventually it all, everything starts to come together, and now it's really happening. I think the public announcements are all out there as far as the upgrade to to A1 systems. They're got solutions for all of the sort of differences, I would say, in the business models, in terms of pre-funding, the onboarding. It's they kind of cherry picked the things that were attractive, that were good for that kind of that small medium enterprise, and then incorporated those into the platform. And we've had these hybrid teams working on these various different problems to coordinate those upgrades.
I just want to jump in and ask a bi-pond logistical question here. So I know that we all have to deal to some degree with GDPR. I would say what that stands for the listeners, but I couldn't for the life of you actually tell you. And I know as a US based company, we had to deal with it because we had customers that were EU based. Does now being owned by an EU company does that have additional implications, or is it all the same constraints that you were already dealing with?
I mean, it does and it doesn't. I mean, GDPR we were subject to regardless because we have customers in Europe. So no matter what, we were getting that one. We also have CCPA, California, something Privacy Act.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I mean, they're all good practices. So just do it.
I didn't know if there was you had to have data servers in Europe as a Europe-based company or something. I couldn't remember if there were not weird, but special constraints like that.
Luckily, I've been shielded from a lot of the legal.
Nice. Keep doing that.
The payment card industry, probably PCI stuff, is probably the firmest regulatory standard in terms of what we need to keep and where we need to keep it, and that kind of stuff. Those things are really exciting. I mean, anything that touches the banking system is usually where it gets really intense. But no, not too bad otherwise. I mean, really, we're still. I think our legal merger is coming up. We're still kind of an American, American LLC right now.
Oh, gotcha. So this is still in progress.
Yeah. But our parent company does have global presence. I mean, we got A1 folks across the U.S. from California to New York, I believe, Florida. And then we got them, down in Brazil and just all over the place, really. They got offices, in all these places. So it's a pretty simple. It's not like they have to set up shop, it's already all there. We just need to switch over to the other one. But no real major, hassles with that. I mean, time zones are always a challenge, but then the flex work really kind of helps with that. Like having, I shift my hours a little earlier, and sometimes some of them shift their hours a little later, and we kind of meet in the middle. Really, a lot of companies, Atlassian, async, remote, that's kind of their culture. They don't have offices. They do everything hybrid, remote. I think it works well because it really helps people with their work-life balance. To be able to be there for the important things for your family, take care of your health. If you want to, you can, if you need to take a Pomodoro, do 20 minutes, run down, change the lunch, come back. It really helps out a lot. And then you still have the offices that you can go into, for whatever sort of town halls and meetups and parties and things like that. I think it's worked out really well. I mean, I think I really have leaned into and embraced hybrid, remote, async work. I think it really helps drive better practices overall, better documentation practices. I mean, face-to-face collaboration is great and irreplaceable, if you want to drive hard through some ideas. But, then after that, you can kind of go back to your home and take care of your bird and, do what you got to do. But it's really good to have that cycle of synchronous and asynchronous communications. I think that's been a real big win. My team's spread across 10 time zones, I think, right now. I got, from Arizona.
So with the two systems coming together, were you involved in the decision? Okay, do we keep one? Do we not keep one? Do we merge features? we analyze the technical debt of both systems? Did their system also have a lot of technical debt, or was that kind of a driving factor in kind of adopting?
That one's kind of out of my remit, there a bit. I mean, it was more on the engineering, what at ShareASale, some of the differences in departments and whatnot, product and technology and DevOps were the same handful of people. Like we as a, we're kind of a product engineer, right? Like, we both did the product advocacy, the research, the customer outreach, working with all the internal stakeholders and the engineering. We did the full stack, front end, back end design, testing, support, all that. In larger organizations, a lot of those things start to split, right? So like the engineers implement the product decisions, that are, so you have like a whole another crowd doing, that product work. And it is amazing to watch it happen. Like people that really have time and the training to put into product research, trying to incorporate like sort of like the relative effort of different teams to pull off, certain feature build, things like that. It's very interesting to watch larger scaled operations, coming together. But we were small scale and did a lot of those things ourselves. So going to the larger organization, a lot of those weren't really our decisions to make necessarily. So we're not surprised by them, and we certainly had our input, but wasn't like as far as like what kind of technical challenges they've got over there. I mean, I was aware of, but wasn't really, more of a window shopper, from the street level view of just kind of kibitzing with other engineers about the challenges they were facing, but they weren't really my challenges to solve.
But on your system, you mentioned there's a lot of technical debt, and that was a ColdFusion system.
It was mixed, a lot of ColdFusion, a big ColdFusion monolith. Woo, and then we had C# apps. We had there was a little bit of VB script in there somewhere. It's this, that, and the other, SQL Server jobs, a mix of applications, but mostly centered around big ColdFusion monoliths serving 4 different sites.
Let me.
Or go, Ben.
I just wanted to ask. So we talked about the fact that the application had a lot of technical debt, and at some point you were beginning to feel that the amount of technical debt was actually slowing the team down. But other things that I hear in various conversations are that it's like 90% of an application kind of doesn't change, and like so much of the activity happens in like, even if it's a sliding window, it's this like sliding window of 10-20% of the app that like that's where the changes are happening. So just to, let's call it, not unfairly paint technical debt with a broad brush, I assume that there was a lot of technical debt that really didn't matter, but there was some technical debt that mattered a lot. Is that fair?
That's completely fair, and I think one of the most important things to learn as an engineer, like we all go on these witch hunts. We see something we don't like, and we want to tear it down, rebuild it, fix it. But no, I mean, functioning code, if it's doing what it wants to, what it's supposed to do, in the time allowed, and no one's complaining, well, it's only technical debt when you need to change it.
Right.
That's
well said. That's very well said.
And the witch hunts are unproductive. You can't just rebuild systems on a whim. You need to be fiscally responsible. But I'm a big fan of tidy first, like Kent Beck's book and that sort of tech. When you get to an area, you make the campground first. You get in there, you see what kind of crimes have been committed, how this doesn't fit right for where I'm going, and then you make those adjustments. You ready the playing field so that you can do those changes. You don't try and do it all at once. I don't want like a big 600 line commit with everything. I'd much rather see these little incremental commits of, okay, we're gonna do these. I'll pull the refactoring book off the shelf over there. But all these small little atomic changes, because assuming your system doesn't have tests, if everything is a beta, you have to keep these changes really small and make sure the system's working all along. But that's the time where you can also put in those tests, right? Like if there's no tests, it's a mess. Clean it up, try and figure out how to make some tests. In ColdFusion, I think TestBox is pretty much the only name in the game right now, but it works great. Use it. So even if you can't get the whole thing under test, get that little piece under a little bit, and then you try and work forward with better practices. I mean, all you can try and do is just raise the bar to what level is, to the right level. I mean, you can't fix everything. There's that kind of a sweet zone. Okay, now it's good enough. You want to reach that good enough so then the next person, it's easier for them to work on, and so on. But you don't want to just rewrite the whole section because these 3 lines weren't pretty.
Well, can you, without telling us anything that you shouldn't be telling us, is there any way that you can articulate like what parts of the technical debt you found to be most challenging versus like permissions management, I don't know, data access? What was the thing that you were like, oh, I wish we had done this better earlier on?
Honestly, I mean, going into January 2018, the keys to the kingdom get handed over. The sea level goes away, and we have now this migration, data center migration, first data center migration, one of many. Going into that, and I'm coming at that, as having written a lot of this code that I know is not great. That has these. I was learning something at the time. And it didn't come out pretty. Things that I thought were the problem that I would have to go back and fix absolutely were not the problem. They're still not fixed. They're never going to be fixed. They still work. There's nothing wrong with it. The problems, that manifested, that became, the critical ones, were the ones that needed to change right now. What do I need to change to be able to move all this stuff? Okay, these IPs are going to change. These IPs are hard-coded. That's the technical debt that matters now.
Absolutely.
It's the part that needs to change right now that if I change it causes other problems. It's the thing that's uncomfortable to change, expensive, breaking changes, things like that. Things that are going to have customer impact no matter what you do. Those are the kind of things that were painful. But really going into the data center migration, I mean, it was a lot of the blending of infrastructure. Infrastructure and code just smashed together. Hard-coded IPs, hard-coded machine names, these kind of things that would make it really hard to scale your infrastructure anyway. Well, I mean, every time you need to replace a server, you need to do code changes. You prefer to have that stuff in configuration management, use some sort of environment, variables to decouple that. But when you're a very, very small team, you kind of get that hammer problem. I mean, the only tool you've got is a hammer. I'm a ColdFusion developer. I'm going to fix everything with ColdFusion, from load balancing to, you name it. And so that's where, you end up fixing too many things with the wrong tool. You end up shoving infrastructure into code. And then later when you need to move all that, okay, now it's a problem. So those are the kind of things really, like the blending of infrastructure and code.
It's such a balancing act. It's such a balancing act because complexity is never free. So even if you get a lot of benefits from more complex systems, like you're talking about with key management, and we can talk about things like containerization and elastic compute stuffs, like there's so much value there, but it's not free. And you have to have people who understand it. You have to have applications that are architected to deal with the constraints of those systems. And you have to start out simply. When I always talk about how I have a lot of little things that are just on a VPS on Windows, and I literally FTP my code to those machines. I don't have anything fancy because I'm just one guy.
I will say that we deal with at Xbyte a lot of companies who are bigger and could go to like an AWS to get kind of some of the dynamic scaling, but they said, you know what, let's address the challenge on our VPS environment and what can we do? And those constraints created innovations.
Yeah.
So they were able to kind of now optimize, and they say, you know what, we don't have to go to this Amazon model. We don't have to redo all of our code to live in serverless, because if we just live with those constraints, let's innovate around that. So let's optimize before we kind of redo everything.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of attention. Auto scaling, it's hot. Everyone, it's auto scale. It's like, but honestly, if your scales that much, but a lot of businesses, you're pretty even throughout most of the year, and you boost around Q4, and then you're back down. It's like there's worse things than just running that full capacity, right? I mean, know what you want to get out of it. Know what your constraints are. Think about it. I mean, I think just lifting and shifting to Amazon and then not kind of cloud architecting to right size for Amazon, I mean, you're not going to get good cost savings out of it. You need to take advantage of the things that'll save money because there's going to be other things that are going to cost a lot. RDS is not cheap. But there's a lot of tools there that are great, that'll really kind of help you accelerate, get to market faster, save developer time. I mean, one of the most expensive things is developer time. If you can just get there faster, you'll end up with a simpler, more nimble solution that didn't cost as much. And even if it costs a little bit more to run, well, you saved a lot on the dev time. If you don't get to market, someone else eats your lunch. So I mean, those are
now from a business perspective, I would say that's even more important, because there's a cost piece of it. But if you can't get to market and your competitors either catch up or pass you, then why would you have gone through that effort? Yes, it may be better, but you've lost that market share at that point, and it's, you have to make that judgment call. Can you get it back with the changes of, if you take a 2-year hiatus from new features? And Ben, you guys went through that where you guys wanted to move off of.
Oh my god!
And
get me started.
But so you guys made the business decision. Hey, yeah, we are going to re-architect everything and not do new stuff. And then you guys ended up having 2 systems, actually, I believe, if I recall from our conversations, like an old and a new that you were adding stuff to for a little bit. So not only were you, it was expensive to do that and lost market share, but then just ongoing having to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly really put a monkey wrench into our, it was a real bar in the spokes, the whole migration data center. I mean, it was unplanned, an unplanned technical project that just, we lost a lot of capacity with, the founders and, the founders, leaving. We didn't have backfill for that. We had other levers. We had people poached. So we lost a lot of capacity right at a time when we needed a lot of capacity, and we weren't really able to maintain any sort of innovation. And so the product starts to get stale. People get customers aren't as happy. And it's harder for the people, at the staff too, because they want to build stuff. I mean, our own product people want to build stuff, but we're like, I'm sorry, we got to stay in business. We've got these unfortunate projects we got to do here. So we kind of went through that too, just sort of like a freeze over these last few years. I mean, it's unfortunate. We tried at times. I mean, we certainly did put out some. We replaced our aging help desk with Zendesk. We did a few other projects. Kind of platform feature projects, things like that, but they were kind of painful. Trying to do too much at once. Like you have, even trying to rebuild and grow this team. It's really hard to hire and onboard and train up while doing projects on a very small team. So it's just, you start biting off more than you can chew, and that's where you start getting these the overtime, and it gets your work-life balance is trash, and you kind of need to find a way to get back on balance with it.
So for the audience's sake, lessons learned from this. So if you have a need to kind of do some sort of specialized project, either re-architect or switch data centers, you guys have Ben, you've been through the re-architecture. Steve, you've done through some the technical problems. What would if you were to give any advice to people? What would it be to kind of do things differently and make it even more successful?
Everyone's conditions are so specific. General advice. I mean, I think.
Or what would you give to 5 years ago advice to Steve to say, hey, tell the stakeholders we got to do this because it'll be making it more successful.
That's a good question. Very good question. What would I tell myself if I had the opportunity 5 years ago?
Here's one, because we also had to deal. We changed managed hosting. We moved from managed hosting to AWS, and then we also did a re-architecture. So we had a lot of learnings. And the one thing that was consistent in all of those was that stuff will just break during migration. Like, we tried so hard to plan, and to
Mhm.
map everything out. And I'm not saying don't plan. Obviously, we want to plan, but just expect the fact that, you know, if you say like, oh, the migration from this data center to that data center is going to take 4 hours on a Saturday night. Like, no, it's going to take all weekend because something's not going to work right and you didn't expect it. And there was a weird edge case, or there was DNS caching, or there was something. Like, just plan for it to take a lot longer than you expected. And you know, it's a once every decade situation. Don't stress too much about it.
Did for both of you guys, did you guys bring on new people to the team or outsource providers who had specialized expertise in AWS, or did you guys try and learn that world internally?
I've been studying, AWS for, a couple of years. I was, had my cloud practitioner cert. That's about as far as I've gotten with it. But I know a lot of great people where that cert was pretty much all they needed. We hired a migration consultant for ours, and I think that was the right move. I mean, if you need to move fast, I mean, we moved from one NTT data center to another NTT data center and moved to this hybrid cloud. But then we found out that the VMware solution we moved on to was going to get sunset. We were going to have to move again. And then that's when AWS came into the mix, and we had funding for a migration partner consultancy. I think if you need to move fast, getting a good migration consultant can absolutely make the day for you. I mean, the team we had was great. They really, we use like the platform migration tools. I mean, they were really good at those tools. What they're not going to be great with is your domain, like knowing what but as long as you have people that know your domain, your business, and that can partner with them, that was a real huge just force, multiplier for us. So like the consultancy was very helpful. I think that if you're not in a huge rush and don't need to do it like under duress and you want to do it yourself, certainly slow walking it, learn the platform, learn Amazon, read the white papers, get into the community, find out which are going to be good matches for your, if you can re-architect as you go, if you can kind of apply a strangler pattern to your old infrastructure and move things over incrementally, that might be a better, safer way to do it than to try and do a big, lift and shift. Some things map well better than others. I think it's just that you kind of have to figure it, kind of feel your way through it. Getting some people that are really experienced with Amazon platform and know some of the caveats. Like, we moved to FSX and RDS. FSX from a Windows flat file cluster that had just like infinite capacity to FSX, which is you pay for capacity. Some of these things, like even though the technology maps one-to-one, the pricing is not going to map one-to-one. So, trying to make these intelligent re-architecture decisions as you move to cloud, deciding where do you want to lean into cloud architecture and where do you kind of need to keep things a little more, with your own custom formula.
We ran into one, just talk about like something unexpected will always happen. We had this one completely out of nowhere issue migrating from one managed hosting to another managed hosting. So it was going from Windows managed hosting to another Windows managed hosting. You'd think it would be like it's a one-to-one technology difference. But we had it set up so that the guys on the target system were helping us migrate all the files. And we had millions of files because this was user uploaded data. And I remember the first weekend we were doing this migration, I was sleeping under the desk, just waiting for it to finish so that I could make sure that the site came back up after they had, said, you can turn that one off, turn this one back on. And at like 3 a.m., the managed hosting guy is like, hey, we're running into an issue. Our Windows servers are configured so that you can't have more than 1.2 million files in any given folder. It's like some system level constraint. And we had just been dumping every file, like, database primary key .file extension into this one giant folder. So because of the constraint on this new system, we had to go back and do, I think what was called like zebra striping, where you kind of like hash the file name and then you put like every hash that begins with A, you put it in this folder, and every hash that begins with B, you put it in this folder. You kind of go like 3 levels deep just to make sure that you don't have too many files in any given folder. And like, we just had to implement that for no other reason that the file system couldn't be too large. And you're like, we didn't anticipate that. We didn't do a test run of over 1.2 million files. It just out of nowhere.
So,
that one will creep
Ben,
up and get you.
Yeah, Ben, with
Say
your
it again?
AWS migration, with your AWS migration, did you guys have an outside firm?
Yes, we did.
And we
I don't know.
had we had hired people. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. So you guys
Yeah, I
running
like what
like
Steve.
contractors or like permanent staff? Ben.
We had, so when the company was started to grow, it was just engineers, and like we all kind of knew ColdFusion, and like we all kind of knew server stuff, but I wouldn't say that any of us were good at servers, which is why we were on managed hosting for so many of the early years. Once we knew that we needed to get to beyond like six VPSs that were set up to sync through special commands, we hired people who just knew more about platform administration, and they were the ones that came up with the plans to get us to more robust managed hosting, and then to eventually AWS itself.
That's probably a good piece of advice there, is to hire in that specialized knowledge. Like, it's just like, if you try and go learn everything yourself, man, like there's a lot to learn. But trying to go from individual contributor to coordinating groups of people is a huge jump. I mean, that is not boy. I mean, code is so easy. It just does what I tell it.
The people are so hard.
But yeah, trying to bring in people, trying to find the right people for the task, and then keep them all pointed in the same direction, and make sure that the right people have got the right information at the right time. I mean, it just becomes this whole different ball game of finding the constraints and trying to unblock people so that so you're getting the most value. I mean, you're paying all these people. I want to get the most out of that effort. So it's really that. It's trying to find where we're not squeezed, but where can I reduce the friction so that this thing can move faster. Like who's needing information right now. But yeah, whether you contract it, hire it, or it's getting a good team. We were, I would say, lucky. I mean, certainly it always helps to be lucky to get a good team that meshes well with your team. We hit the ground running. Everything went great. I mean, our Amazon migration was very smooth. I mean, yeah, we really did hit that no downtime, and that was a combination of they had the UI was down, but the real-time tracking stuff, the cash register stuff, the money didn't go down. But it took that combination of their expertise in the Amazon systems and then our knowledge of our systems, like the weird idiosyncrasies of the way that our real-time systems read and write data, things like that. And then we were hashing around ideas. We can do this, we can do that, and then finally it just all clicks, and you have this plan. Like, oh my god! Like, I wish I would have thought of this when we did that other migration. I would have gotten more sleep that night.
Well, okay, so we had hired people specifically to help us manage our platform, and I think not specifically to get us onto Amazon, but I think that was the future vision. So this team, I mean, when I say team, I think it was two guys. They had set up test environments in Amazon. They had done small kind of representative migrations from our Windows servers to Amazon. They had investigated all the database stuff. They had spun up databases. Like, they had really put in quite a bit of work to say, okay, we're ready to go. Saturday night, we're going to do the migration. We're going to be down for 4 hours. It'll probably only take 2, that kind of thing. Like, they really did their due diligence. And this is why I say, like, stuff just goes wrong. So I think we went offline at Saturday night at, I don't know, like 10 p.m. or something Eastern time. It was supposed to come back up by 2 a.m. We were down, I think, through Tuesday. Cause like, we just like, stuff just didn't work and they couldn't figure it out. And like, they kept bringing the system up, but like, things weren't routing properly. They weren't going through the elastic load balancers properly, like Route 53 or whatever, like everything that they had done in testing for some reason just didn't work once they were dealing with the production system. And you're like, I don't know how much more due diligence they could have done. It's like, stuff just happens.
Well, I'll tell you, for our bigger customers, actually probably for most of our customers, we do basically a full migration. We know it's going to take 2 steps, like a full test migration, so that you can now fully test everything, all working together in your test environment. And then we know that on go live date, we're going to have to do updates, and it's going to be extra work. We don't charge customers for this. I mean, it's all baked into the service fee, but it helps ensure you're not going to run into the million file unless you just happen to hit your 1.2 million records that day. You would find stuff like that, and
gotcha.
And we encourage them to test everything. I think UI testing is hard. I mean, unless you have a QA team, or unless you've done.
I got my QA team right here. For people listening, I held up my mouse.
That's right. We had Spotify. Yeah, Ben, you and I just yesterday talked about AI testing too. So that'd be something. Maybe one day we'll get to see AI doing all of our UI testing.
Well, can we pivot for a second? Yeah. So I don't know that much about it's affiliate marketing. Is that what your system does?
Performance marketing, affiliate marketing.
Is there an AI angle in there that you guys see at all, or anything you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone's racing to leverage it in every way possible, right? So, it's pretty broadly applicable. If a person can do it, you can get a machine to do it probably faster and 80% as well or better, or at least help the people do it faster. So it's kind of where do you leverage it? You don't really want to replace people with AI. That's not a very good narrative, but you want to let people do their jobs more efficiently, effectively using the best tools. I mean, I don't cast shame on developers for using autocomplete. Why would, I think, but not just developers, you know what I mean? Everybody from help desk to, to like operations, are going to benefit from it, in the long run. I mean, we're, going to need to build nuclear powered data centers, but but no, the potential there is massive. I think for help desk, for testing. I mean, certainly for coding, it's not just code completion and generation. It's documentation and unit testing, and helping to build all those things. If you get into like this virtuous cycle of building your docs, your tests, and your code with AI help, it really helps. It helps with that sort of like document driven processes. That helps you with the asynchronous work. I mean, it's like face-to-face is great, but then you need to write things down. If things start off written down, then it's easier to sync up face-to-face and having read those documents and, move from there. I'm not worried about losing my job to AI. I'm just trying to figure out how I can use it better for all of us. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the unit testing and documentation is that low hanging initial fruit that everyone's kind of, because it's the best practices that often get forgotten. Because it's like, all right, you're moving so fast. How do you get documentation? I mean, a lot of you talk about Google. I deal with Google a lot, and it's historically their documentation's terrible because they're just moving so fast. They're doing too many changes. Like we can't. How do we possibly keep up with documentation? So yeah, I think having AI do some of that and just kind of you finish it up, and AI kind of creates your documentation. It may not be perfect.
Right. We use Cloudflare kind of as an edge, WAF, edge provider, all that stuff. And they're impressive. They've kind of had an API first approach for a long time. I don't know if they use, I can only imagine they're using AI in their development process. I'm impressed that they're able to rapidly innovate their service offering. They're it's like a daily basis. It seems like something's changing on there. It's a little maddening. I can never find anything, but their documentation updates is in sync. That's what's really impressive is the fact that the docs are updated are in sync with the UI. I'm like, I don't know what magic trick you guys are doing, but I imagine, there's probably some automation involved. That's been really impressive. It's just so often docs just fall out. They fall out of sync so fast. They're not relevant anymore. They're misleading, telling you old versions.
I think having the AI for, I don't know if this is the right term, but I know if I go into ChatGPT, there's sort of for lack of a better term, a marketplace of custom GPTs that people have designed. I think it would be really great if every system, like every vendor, then released a ChatGPT trained version of their documentation. Because documentation is great, but sometimes you don't even know where to look. And it'd be great to have a conversation like, how do I set up special constraints in the Cloudflare WAF, I don't know, like DDoS protection, and it could just give you like, oh, here's this and here's some links to our documentation. Like, how amazing would that be?
Yeah. I mean, using natural language search. I mean that's great for customers. That's great for developers. That's great for everybody.
Yeah.
Within the right scope. I follow like ThoughtWorks. There's a couple they do like ThoughtWorks Tech Radar. I can't remember the name of the product it was, but it was one of these LLMs that you use on your whole code base and documentation. You just point it at everything, and the idea is that it's gonna figure out the interdependencies between different applications and code projects, and then be able to answer more general questions about the system. And then start to help with the overall system architecture. I think there's a lot of promise in that direction. We're just starting to see it, a bit. It takes a lot of trust. Like, hey, here's all my code, and it's not going to let it deploy anything or make any changes. But just in terms of developer productivity, to be able to understand, if I need to integrate with this other system over here and I don't know where the code is, where the docs are, it's just that. I mean, it's help you find the documentation that you need when you need it. They talk about it being like a pair, your pair programming assistant, very much so, help you find the information you need when you need it. So you're not blocked, help other people get unblocked. So I think we'll see a lot of rise there. I mean, for software engineering development, teams like that, going to a larger organization, certainly that's one of the things you see is the KB. It's just sprawling, right? I mean, you just like every team has got their own sections, and then features have got their own sections. But then we change. Hey, let's do it this way. We make organizational decisions about different ways of documenting things, but then all the old things don't go away. So like the KBs are tend to get a lot of cruft over time, technical debt. It's not just for code. But that's where I think your AIs can come in. Like, hey, let's refine this. Let's make it. I mean, you can help on the one hand find stuff within the cruft, but two, also kind of help tune that cruft so that you can make it relevant, concise, and well organized. And I think that's where a lot of the benefit is. Like these things that, I could do it myself, but there's a million other things I have to do. I need to do the thing that's most broken that no one else can do right now. And that's almost never going to be, let's sift through the KB.
It'd be interesting. I'm just thinking out loud here because talking about keeping documentation up to date. One of the things that we always did at my previous company was as we did releases, we didn't have like release notes, but I think every month the support team and the technical writers would say, here's all the stuff that we released feature wise this month. And we had it on a public site somewhere. But talking about keeping your knowledge base up to date, it'd be great to have an AI where you could say, hey, here are the release notes for this month. Where are all the places in the documentation that we need to update to make sure that this is in alignment? I don't know if it could do that, but it feels like that, when they talk about the AI can do stuff that humans can do just much faster and in certain kind of verticals, that feels like something that it would be really good at.
Yeah, or double check our documentation to say, hey, did this field change? Go through the documentation. Can you do this? Like every day, it'll just kind of go through. Okay, did anything change? I need to redocument.
Let me pivot for one more second. Sorry, because you mentioned ThoughtWorks. And ThoughtWorks, I think the chief scientist, I think is what he's called, Martin Fowler. I think is the chief scientist at ThoughtWorks. And I believe he's the author of Refactoring, which you had mentioned. And I don't think I've read Refactoring. I've read Enterprise Messaging Patterns, I think, is one of his other books. Is the Refactoring book a good book? Would you recommend?
I think so. I mean, you might look at it as an experienced dev. You might pick it up and be like, oh my God, this stuff is so basic. Like why is this Mickey Mouse stuff? But I think it really breaks. The idea is that we're going to break down these simple changes we might make and create a language around it so that we can talk about, extracting functions, inlining variables, just to kind of create a common language around refactoring. And then to sort of document the types of refactors that you might do. Like if I've got a big sprawling function, I might extract a function from that. If I've got like a little function that doesn't do very much, I might inline it. But so it kind of creates this language around it. I think that's very beneficial. I don't know if you'll learn any new techniques necessarily. Probably.
I feel like it's always it's practice. It's practice. Yeah. It's like you gotta nothing. You never learn something once and then remember it. It's all about repetition.
I enjoy just picking it up and thumbing through it. I'm
adding it to my list.
I read it cover to cover. It's kind of a reference.
Is this your Audible list?
This is my Audible list. And kind of along the same lines, a book that people rave about, which I also don't think I've ever read, is Michael Feathers has a book called like Working with
Effectively
Legacy
with
Code.
Legacy Code. Yep, I got that one on the shelf here too. That one I highly recommend. That is a really good book. Very practical, tactical information about how to find seams in code, how to break things down, how to layer. I mean, you've got a bucket of code and you want to turn that into a layered application, like how to find the seams, how to separate the concerns. So there's a lot of really good stuff in that book. I really enjoyed that one. That was more of a cover to cover page turner for me.
Yeah. I'm a cover to cover guy when it comes to reading books. I know that a lot of books are designed for you to kind of pick and choose chapters, but that feels like more work to me, trying to figure out how to attack a book. I'll just read it front to back. And then it's filed.
There's a compliment to the refactoring book called I think it's Refactoring Databases. It's a different group of authors, but it's a similar book, but for database refactoring, which that one was very helpful too. I learned some things out of there, just some techniques for getting from A to B without breaking A. There was some good stuff in there. A very, very good compliment to the refactoring book from Fowler. That one was a good one.
We'll have to add some show notes about these great book suggestions.
Take a picture of my library up here for you. I've also got MS-DOS 6.22 over there.
and Ben, for both of our benefits, we'll go use ShareASale, do some affiliate links to go buy these books.
There you go.
There you go. I think somewhere, I don't know if I finally let it go, I had Ben Forta's ColdFusion 5 reference. That was a good one. That was helpful too.
We were.
I hit the books. I mean, a combination of books, blogs, talks. You know what I mean? Like I like the. There's a lot of great stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of great knowledge out there. If you can carve out some time to kind of tap into it, But it's kind of you want to do stuff too. It's like I want to apply this knowledge. I'm a big fan of like team topologies. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with with that, but just about you're trying to different team interaction, different types of teams and interaction modes between them, kind of like feature teams, platform teams. You've got, complex subsystem teams, and then the sort of like the modes of interaction between them. I find, that was a very good book, not an engineering book, just a team strategy organization book, team topologies, but they introduced in there a concept I want to come back around to, something Ben mentioned about doing the minimum, this concept of a thinnest viable platform, right?
Interesting.
You do the least that you need to facilitate your automation at that time, and then you grow it as necessary, right? You don't want to put in this huge apparatus to deploy Hello World, right? So you grow your, you don't.
I mean, you can.
You certainly can. And if you're, trying to learn those concepts, that's not a bad way to do it. But for an enterprise production system that's, got revenue attached to it, you always have to balance, cost, complexity, time to market. So, that's like technical, like you said before, Ben, not all technical, but that's bad. And actually it's very good and necessary, I think, for any sort of a business to have a healthy relationship with technical debt. You need to take on debt, like to build your business, right? You're going to take loans.
100%. And this is where the metaphors tend to break down, or not tend to, but like this is where metaphors fall short, is that metaphors have a lot of baggage. So we use the metaphor of technical debt, but in the real world, if you have debt, like someone's coming for you eventually, and they're going to take your stuff. But in the digital world, there's a lot of debt that people never come to collect. And that's it's hard to reconcile that with the kind of here's the elevator pitch on technical debt.
But Steve's point, though, is that a lot of people out there are saying that debt's good. Like you might as well preserve cash in your business.
Yeah.
And
responsible
take on debt.
Credit usage, right? Okay, we're gonna take
a great parallel. Yeah, great parallel to technical debt. Like, you know what? Okay, we're gonna take on some debt because we're gonna preserve those development hours to do other things.
Yeah.
Right. But then, like, the responsible part, the back half of it is knowing when it's going to be collected and when you need to pay it back, right? Like, these are the conditions under which this comes due. or a plan for, okay, we're going to chip away at this, and in 6 months it's going to be paid off. It's like you take out the loan, but then you have a plan for what you're going to do with it. Maybe you're just going to write it off. Maybe this is going to be how it's going to be for the rest of the time. And when it sunsets, you win. You never have to pay it back. Other systems, if it's a dynamic system, you find yourself back in there making changes. You know what I mean? By the time I'm doing the third thing again manually, I'm ready to automate to do it right. You know, so it's like it's that responsible, you know, monitoring of it. You know, you keep a log, talk to your engineers. I mean, the people who are doing the work are going to be the ones impacted by it. So, you know what I mean? Like trying to have a good habit, I guess, around it, not avoiding it at all costs, because that's a premature optimization. Those are like witch hunts. You know what I mean? If you bend over backwards to have these perfectly polished systems, you're going to build the thing right, but you might not build the right thing. And without customers, right?
I love that.
Now, do either of you guys have set aside hours every week for developers to go back and take care of technical debt?
I don't.
Not fixed hours, but, you know, as part of a project. I mean, like I said, that's the tidy first sort of approach. Like when we start in on something, we know there's going to be, you know, it's going to be a messy yard, and before I mow it, let's try that.
Is Ken? You mentioned? Did you mention Kent Beck? You mentioned somebody. Is he
Kent
the one?
Beck he wrote Tidy First and a bunch of other stuff.
Is he the one who said make the change easy, then make the easy change, something like that?
That could be one of his. I'd have to look. I don't want to attribute it if it's wrong, but you know. Well, it's weird that, you know, we live in a world where so many of these founders, you know, everybody who wrote the Agile Manifesto is pretty much working still.
Yeah.
They switched to waterfall. They're like,
flash in the pan.
And something, we have a few minutes here. You guys had mentioned this, and I think Ben, you've mentioned this in the past. Strangler patterns, as kind of a way to kind of address some of the re-architecture. So for those listening who've not heard that term before, Steve, can you go into kind of what that is and how you guys may have used some of it?
Well, patterns of legacy displacement, I think, is kind of like the fancy term, legacy displacement. It's got a nice sound to it. But one of the patterns there is the strangler fig, right? Strangler fig's a plant that grows up the side of trees and strangles them. I'm not sure if it's a fig itself, but anyways, that's where the analogy comes from. This idea that you have a plant here that acts as a structure. This is your original code base. This is your original feature base, and the strangler fig is the plant that grows around it and uses that structure to build itself. That's your new system. So you sort of like you keep your old system in place while you part out the features, right? The analogy does kind of break down a little bit because you're not replacing usually the whole system at once, but you take a piece of it and you pull out that service, right? The idea is to identify services within your monolithic application, your big app that you can pull out and run independently. What can I run and deploy independently? What can I put another team on, right? I got one.
Yeah. Well, so I was going to say, so one very small, the first way I ever sort of dealt with the strangler pattern myself, or the legacy displacement pattern, is I mentioned that we had all of these files on a local Windows network drive, and we were eventually running out of space. And the managed hosting was like, well, we could put you on this special network attached drive, but it would be like a $50,000 down payment for us. We'd have to go purchase it for you, and it would give you like terabytes of storage. So we said, okay, that's crazy. We can start using AWS S3 simple storage service. It's infinite. So, but we couldn't just snap our fingers and have everything on S3. So what we had to start doing when we went to write a file in our system, we would start to dual write it. We would write it both to S3 and to the local file system. And then we had a background task that was going through all the old files and slowly syncing them up to S3. And once we had parity of all the files in S3 and in the local file system, then we essentially cut the old file writes off, and all new file writes were only going to S3. So the S3 pathway essentially strangled, given the pattern here, the old file writing operation.
I think maybe that's where like the Strangler name comes in, is that you eventually kind of load balance your way away from your old solution. You have this, it puts you in a position where you don't have, where you can fail fast. You can fall back to your old system. It preserves the integrity of the old system while creating the new system, and lets you do all that testing and proofing safely, so that you don't end up working through Tuesday, trying to get your stuff back up and running. And that's probably another one of the biggest important lessons is trying to have those fallback plans, like trying to leaps of faith are great and everything, but having a fallback plan where you can save your bacon if things go sideways is really golden. Like that's what you really need to bake that into your plans, especially for money production systems. If people are going to be complaining within moments, you don't want to be the one who did that. But yeah,
I think you can also, the other benefit is that you can do the actual business tasks or the new market features. So you could say, hey, you know what? We're going to, instead of it being a 2-year plan to re-architect, is now a 4 or 5-year plan. But you know what? Interdispersed within that plan is going to be new features. So we strangle this one, then we do a new feature. Strangle this one, new feature, and then it takes a lot longer. But you know what? You don't lose that competitive market space you're in.
It's also, I kind of, in terms of like technical debt, it's responsible because that old system, everything in there is working, and you're only taking out the parts that you need to. Like you don't just do everything because for the sake of completeness. Right. But yeah, you make those targeted decisions about where are the pain points. This thing we want to build on to this system. We want this to do more things. Okay, let's pull it out. Now we can work on it in isolation. Or another part of the system is having performance problems. Okay, well, you can pull that out and then we can scale it independently of the rest of it. So, like those decisions on like when to pull out services like that, that's really, some of the high level stuff that you got to know your domain, know your systems, have the visibility, observability to see, where are the pain points? Because you're not always right. Sometimes intuition gets you there, but numbers are really useful for backing it up.
All right. Well, Steve, we're at the top of the hour here. We've gone into a lot of good topics. I think Ben's got some good books to listen to from this. So
I've been looking for books. I'm trying to get back into reading.
Well, I've got a pile for you, Ben.
By reading, listening. No one reads anymore.
I do. I even have real books.
You really?
I've started moving to Kindle more now because it's portable and it's easier to keep
something nice about a physical book though, and I'm just of that age, I guess, where I remember reading physical books. But
it's great up until you got one of these tomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, from an office employee standpoint, I have a commute, so I love Audible. So I'm just like, all right, or podcasts. My kids joke that every time they come in the car with me, I'm listening to my own show. So awesome. I'm boosting our Spotify rankings by
the commute wasn't always bad. It was good for reading. Certainly, it was always good to read on the train. And walking through downtown Chicago was always So there's a nice walk along the.
But now we get to be with our birds and our dogs, and our children, I suppose.
There we go. All right, so Steve, a minute here. Any final advice you can give people who are looking to re-architect or going through an acquisition, or anything that we didn't talk about today that you want to kind of throw out there to the audience?
We did cover a lot of topics. For anybody facing I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, Ryan. You'll have to edit. Could you say it one more time?
Oh, I'm just saying. Any final advice? I mean, you can be like, you know what? You guys did a great job asking me questions. But anything that we didn't cover, any advice you want to give to people who are either going through an acquisition or going through technical debt, and that we didn't kind of cover here, that you want to throw out some advice to people? Parting words.
Well, I would say that for anybody like looking at an acquisition, it's a challenge, and lean into it. I think. I mean, it's a great experience. Learning how to merge and mesh with another organization. it doesn't come along all the time. It doesn't happen to a lot of people. And I got a lot of experience in startups as well. You get a lot of experience there, wearing a lot of different hats. I would say, for anybody facing those kind of technical challenges, whether it's migrations or technical debt or anything, or just their own growth plan. I mean, it's just like lean into, the learning, the community, connect with people. I think a lot of engineers, we want to, be wizards and hermits up on, a cliff somewhere and work in isolation, but really people, people, networks with people and sharing knowledge. I think that's really where it's at as far as helping to accelerate, any sort of project, your own personal growth, things like that. It's working with people and building networks, and then, mentoring and being mentored. Those will help. People factors ultimately trump technology factors, right? Businesses, I think, succeed and fail because of, personal factors, communication. Technology is almost never the deciding factor for whether a business makes it or not. I think it can make it more efficient, and that's, I think, kind of where the job is. We want to answer those technical challenges efficiently and sustainably, so that our customers are served, our stakeholders are happy, and our engineers are growing. And I think we can have all that, but it's not easy.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. A lot of good stories, a lot of good information for anyone and I know a lot of people are going through some of this, whether they're acquired, they're dealing with technical debt, or they're looking to kind of re-architect. So a lot of good stuff, some good books for people. So thank you again for joining us. Ben, as always, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
I need to come up with my own ending, so I'm not always stealing yours.
It's all good. Just words.
Just words. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you, guys. Good to talk.